The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Hi, Dr. D. Cashman. Welcome to the Mind, Body, Spirit show. Today's subject I think you might enjoy. It's about the climate and health, how we can make a better world, improve its climate, save the world, avoid the sixth extinction, which is coming. We've had 5, and I think we may be heading to the 6th, in our own health, so that we could live to be 100 or over and be healthy and avoid most chronic disease. The two are related, and I will point out to you we can help the environment externally, the world, and our environment to live a healthy life. You're going to find this very interesting. First, let's kind of review a little bit things that I didn't totally remember until I read it over again. Let's look at the world. Okay, we get the world, and then as you leave the Earth, and the clouds generally are about 5 miles up or so, and if it rains about 5 miles into the troposphere. The troposphere, okay? The troposphere is about 11 miles, okay? Clouds that have snow in them are up about 7 miles, okay? But the troposphere is about 11 miles, and then we have the ozone layer. The ozone layer surrounds the Earth, okay? And the rays from the sun bounce somewhat from that, otherwise our world will be overheated. We want a warm world, not too cold. If we had no ozone layer, then we would be extremely cold. So we needed to help regulate the sun coming through. The ozone layer is more concentrated at the north and the south pole. The areas where it's thin, and there's areas where it's thick. Beyond the ozone layer is made of 3. It's a chemical formula to what's in there, and it's 3 oxygens. And when CO2, for example, has 2 of them. And beyond that, there is the stratosphere, which is about 30 miles above that, and then you're flying to the moon. Okay, so we have the Earth, about 11 miles to the ozone layer, and the ozone layer is formed over the hot areas of the world, and it's thicker at some parts than others, and it's thicker at the poles, for example, so that you have some idea. And it's formed over the tropics. It's formed, but the wind takes it all around the world, so it's covered the world and protects us there. And till the Industrial Revolution, the byproducts of metabolism of trees and plants and humans, it was all in balance till the Industrial Revolution, when it really started making things and using oil and gas, and things, and the world started heating up. So it's the damage is occurring, and the thickness of the ozone layer is measured in Dobson units, and so that we know at all times what it is, and what science is saying, that if we increase the temperature of the world about 2 degrees, it may be excessive, and we will not exist anymore. We've had 5 extinctions in the past, okay? And the Great Dying was 240 million years ago, which volcanoes came up and covered the earth in soil that was 3 Eiffel Towers thick. Can you imagine that? Yeah. And it killed most of the animals and plants, the great majority of them. So the present environment, because if we increase our 2 degrees Celsius, okay, that's about 3.5 Fahrenheit, the human beings will have difficulty, in animals and plants, to exist on this earth. So we want to control the global warming because of industry is doing this, and a lot of the reason that industry is doing, but the oil and the gas and machinery and electricity and manufacturing is all affecting and causing greenhouse gases, which then get caught in the ozone layer and is piling up on us. But a lot of it is due to capitalism, the things that we do. But, we're trying to stay alive, and we're living longer. At the last century, average lifespan was 30 years. Now it's in the 70s and almost 80s for women, men maybe 76 or so. And we have houses to live in, and they're getting bigger, and we're driving cars, and all this is adding to a global warming. So in 2015, governments thought it's time to have a conference, and they had one in Paris, and they called it the COP21. That was the name of the conference. A lot of nations attended, and some stayed away because they wouldn't participate. And we did have an agreement, but there have been disagreements. The Republican Party in this country, and I'm not trying to pick political parties, I'm just saying that's in history. I'm not saying which side I'm on, especially the last president even pulled out of it. But a lot of the agreements, like even you see today, they just had a conference in Italy and Scotland, and the president came back with very little agreement. The trouble with the conference in 2015, people said yes to a lot of things, and they were going to get rid of greenhouse gases and watch electricity and what people were eating, but it had no teeth, it had no enforcement. So what did get done? Very little. To us as a citizen, I would say very little this time, but I didn't read the whole contract, so let's say not a lot. But that's why I'm here to discuss it, to get you interested, but what maybe you could do it, okay? And what they decided there is that we should try to keep the rise in temperature Celsius, okay, to about 1.5 degrees. And once we reach 2 degrees of Celsius by 2050 or so, the Earth could be in big time trouble at that point. So Bill Gates, very famous for Microsoft, with a good heart, has taken a lot of his money and went all over the world look at other countries, spoke to their people, looked at their culture. He had a tremendous amount of research. Him and his former wife, they used their foundation and spent, probably almost $1 billion trying to help the world. So he wrote a book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, the solutions we have and the breakthrough we need. I encourage you to read this book, because I'm going to give you some information, but I want you to do some reading to gather more, just like I'm doing. Every time there's a new book out, I try to read it to increase my knowledge. And what Bill Gates is saying is that we are yearly adding about 51 billion chemicals to the world and to the green space and greenhouse gases, and he would like to show us, help us to get this to zero. Well, obviously that's not going to be easy. And then COVID-19 came along, which made it even more difficult, but interesting enough, because we aren't flying as many planes, driving as many cars. There has been a 5% reduction in greenhouse gases just from that. It's interesting. So from Gates traveling, he determined that there are about 1 billion people in the world who have no electricity at all. Since electricity causes about 17 to 19% of global warming, we're going to have to allow them to have it. They don't have any lights, for example, and they don't keep warm. So that's part of the calculation, and sees how difficult it is. The UN set up a panel called the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. It's a panel that they put together around 2015 or so, who come out with recommendations. And Bill Gates even spoke about, he's widely read. You can see that from reading his book, and he recommends other books. He reads too. It's like me, a book every 3 days, okay? And one he recommends is Weather for Dummies, okay? Well, I was a dummy, I read it. Now I know a little bit more. I'm a little less of a dummy, okay? And what he's saying too is that wind, which we use wind power today, we use solar panels, and water, we use that too, but it's just not enough. It's just not, to switch to this source of energy will not solve the energy problem. And he's saying in his book, electricity is about 27% of global warming. So you see how important it is, but we can't really exist without it. We can maybe use it a little bit less, turn off the lights, and you can take a plan from your electric company, a green space plan, where you pay a little more, but the source of your energy for electricity is from green technology. Well, that's kind of interesting. And the thing Gates is saying at the end, we need really a push, and what he's saying, we will have to invent something to really get into this, just like he invented computer chips, okay? Well, it's going to be a lot more difficult, but at least he's speaking about it. And so Gates is saying we have to go to zero. We have to develop more solar, more wind technology. And he's thinking tech will carry us the rest of the way, but it hasn't happened yet. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I agree with him. We need to try, and I congratulate him for his foundation to really get involved with this. I read another great book. I encourage you to read this, because this tells you things that you yourself might be able to do to help the global warming situation. It's called Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. Things that we can do, that industry can do. I get the name of this book I was found in Bill Gates' book. That's why I learned it, and I just bought it. Bought a couple of copies of it. I hope to have one here at the library. And what it really does, it lists in order the most important things that we could do. I'm not going to go down the 100 today with you, taking too much time. But I'd like to review with you the top 10, okay? And it's interesting because I kind of knew which ones, but I didn't pick number one. Number one is refrigeration. Yeah, the chemicals from refrigeration, the hydrocarbons that are used to make your refrigerator work. And CFCs are called, and they switched to other chemicals. I want to go all through those with you, and it's difficult to phase them out. They're being phased out a step at a time. I think the last ones will be phased out till 2028. Yeah, it's being done a little bit at a time because of their tremendous influence on global warming. Okay, but number two, I was glad to see, and I didn't know it was going to be two, is wind turbines. Yeah, they are indeed making a difference. Remember, in Germany, they didn't want nuclear energy, so like France is 70 to 80% nuclear. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you read about it, you kind of wonder we shouldn't be using more of it. There's only been 2 nuclear plants built in the world, besides the ones in France, in the last few years. When you review the accidents and deaths from nuclear energy, it's been extremely small. It's been extremely small. And France has developed them that they have 50 of them, I think. They can be placed, and they've had a good safety record. And let's face it, we need to look at that. But there's so much politics behind it that you say nuclear and people don't want to act on it. But from reading through it, maybe not a bad idea. Number 3 is kind of interesting. Reduce our food waste. Yeah. A third of the food that is grown and manufactured, we are wasting. We're throwing it away. If we would pay more attention to that in manufacturing and what plants, what animals, whatever, we wouldn't have to expend the energy and that ends up adding to global warming. Yeah, that could be avoided. So that's number 3 on the list, to pay more attention to that. That could be government rules and making the public aware of this. Kind of interesting. And in this book, they put the gigatons of global gases associated with each item, so you know it's pretty darn accurate. And number 4 is for us to eat a plant-based diet. Why is that? Well, if you eat animals, you got to clear the forest. You got to feed the animals. They put out methane and nitrous oxide. They on both ends of their body, and that adds tremendously. The methane they put out. See, the only gas going up is not just CO2. It's maybe 87%, but methane has tremendously more effect on global warming than CO2. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so does nitrous oxide, not quite as much. So for us, if we were to switch to say 80% plant-based diet and ate maybe chicken or turkey, and we would not eat as much meat, for which we have to clear off the forest, feed the animals, they put out some gases themselves, and meat is not that healthy to begin with. So I mean, it's interesting. That's number 4 on my list here. Number 5 is tropical forest. To build and make the forest bigger. Trees really are almost like a family. They interconnect with their roots. They absorb the CO2 of the air. If they die, they're about 50% carbon. So they add to it once they die, but while they're alive, and some live a few hundred years, but some live 1,000 years. And they're pulling in CO2 all the time out of the atmosphere. So forests are interesting. And you can even have cows grazing underneath the forest. Yeah, I'll speak about that. That's called silo pasture. Silo pasture. That's one of the top 10 too. Is that we could combine forest and some animal culture. Next on the list is educating the girls in the world, especially in the poor part of the world. Their nations do not provide reproductive materials, so they would like to have a baby when it's appropriate. Most women want that, but they don't have anything to prevent a pregnancy. And to educate the girls about how to have a baby, how to avoid a baby, that is high on the list because there results in some others having 10 children and they only wanted one, and because no reproductive information materials were available for them. So contraception, education, family planning is important. It's number 7 on this list. Interesting. And then we talked about number 8 is solar farms, where we have farms with solar panels. They absorb energy, it's collected and then sold to the public, but we're not using oils or coal or gases, which add a lot more to global warming. And number 10 on this here is rooftop solar, that on our roofs, that we have solar panels on top. That could get to be all over the world. Probably need a little support because they may be a little bit expensive. Also got to maintain them, but you don't have to lose electricity. So these are all things, but the rest of this book with stories too, and tells you how much it was saved. There's 100 ways that you could help the environment. So a big thing I'd like to mention that's further down in there too is plant a tree. I keep on planting trees, and some are getting pretty tall, and they paint the CO2 in the universe, and so that's a big one. And eat a plant-based diet. Hey, you got 2 things already, and you're on the way. But gather information. This is what we're all about here, and our world energy systems that we use now, cost about $5 trillion. So if we use different forms of energy, we might save a lot of money, And again, the COP21 Paris meeting was 2015, and they formed a coalition of countries that gathered together, and they formed a breakthrough energy coalition. Bill Gates was part of that. And they invested in 40 companies that were more energy sensitive. And so the name was changed to a mission invention at the suggestion of President Modi from India. So that's what it's called now. And again, it accelerated more industry inventions, okay? And Bill Gates gave $400 million to get things moving, and so did a lot of other people with a lot of money from around the world. So Bill Gates feels there's got to be technology that will advance us quicker to reduce global warming. But again, remember, he's a technocrat, a genius, obviously. And but somebody's going to be working on that. Maybe he'll come up with the answer. And why zero? I mean, Bill Gates keeps on saying we need to head to zero of emissions because greenhouse gases trap heat. And it doesn't take a lot of rise in temperature or drop in temperature to have a tremendous effect on the world, okay? And trapped gases, once they're there, caught by the ozone layer, you won't believe this, a fifth of them will be there 10,000 years from now. Yeah, 10,000 years from now. And so the change in the atmosphere occurred around 1850 or so when we started coming up with industries. Then we started burning oil, and which had been compressed for thousands of years. Oil, coal, gases, we dig them up, and then we burn them and send the residue up to the atmosphere. So we're heading, unless we do something, we're heading to the sixth extinction in the world. And if we don't eat healthy, we have a path to diabetes and its 30 chronic diseases, which medicine today is just letting you have it and then treat the disease. They're not teaching you anything about prevention, but I am big time. Books, TV, radio, information, YouTube. Probably have 700 TV shows on YouTube, which also goes into podcasting. So I'm handing you information, which I'm doing today. It's not about me, it's about you. I want to save that you have a happy life as well as your children. So we want to avoid that at 2 degrees, okay? But there are different parts of the world that already have a higher temperature, almost 2 degrees. It's not throughout the world, but other parts of the world. And why is that? They have a lot of dry soil. It's difficult. Can't cool it off. So remember I spoke about methane, which is a lot more effect on global warming, and then there's nitrous oxide, which years past, maybe still today, you use in the dental office, makes you laugh and forget about your pain, okay? So methane is 120 times stronger, and so to keep this, in mind. And sunlight has different wavelengths, okay? But it can pass right through the ozone layer, go right through it, but some of it bounces off, especially at the poles where the ozone layer is thicker, but there's some holes in the ozone layer too. But sunlight is melting the ice, and the heat from that goes into the water, and the water expands because it becomes hotter, and the water levels are rising. Even in Miami now, they see that the water level at times is rising more, and you wonder what's going to happen to Manhattan. Since industrial times, we've had at least a 1 degree rise since around 1900, 1850 in that area. But if we don't decrease the emissions, we'll have 1 to 3 degrees centigrade by mid-century. We may not be here, and well, probably I won't be here anyway. But we have to worry about the children and their children, and the oceans will rise up. But even now, we're seeing wetter storms and more forest fires and more hot days. And if you look at a graph starting around 1950, the CO2 emissions, the graph really looks like this. So we know emissions are increasing. In the air since 1850 has been moister. In California, we have wildfires. It's because it has more dry wood. And as the polar ice melts, the sea levels increase, and can cause more flooding. So Europe has noticed more increased heat too, and 50 in some of the plants that we have that feed the people, like in Europe. They eat a great deal of corn and products made therefrom, and global warming. And corn causes a lot more global warming than other plants. And in Syria, they had a drought. It wasn't raining from 2007 to 2010. 1.5 million people left their farms. It's a tremendous effect, and I don't think we heard enough about that to make people conscious about global warming, because I'm sure that affected other things, the social life and their farming methods and what they eat, and there was some war things going on. Maybe related partly to them having to move, which I'm sure had a great effect. 13 million Syrian people were displaced in 2018. By mid-century, climate could be as bad as COVID-19 that we're experiencing now. And sometimes things change more quickly. The permafrost, the coal, the oil, the gas, sometimes it causes quicker release, like volcanoes that we heard about. It can really speed things up. You never know that's occur. That could happen tomorrow morning. Okay, it's unpredictable. So we got to pay attention. And so the richest countries, we, the U.S., have a global imprint of about 19.6. In France, 6.6. What a tremendous difference. We need to start paying attention, and just for our president to go to Italy and Scotland, wherever they went, we got to do more than that. We have to make people aware as to what they're eating. Whether we are just to put up houses, because we're going to have a lot more people by the end of the century. There may be 10 billion in the world by then. That are wiping out the forests, and global warming will occur because of that. And what's making things worse too, that oil is cheap. It is cheaper. It's cheaper than a soft drink. Okay, go to Costco, 8 liters of soda, $6 a gallon of gas, 2.85. You see the point? So that's a problem too. And remember, the global population may be heading towards 10 billion end of this century. Our buildings that we have now will double by 2060. It takes energy to build them, to make this steel. Cement is a big cause of global warming. Cement is making cement. And so we are building another New York City every month for the next 40 years when you consider the world in construction. So we can really see that But when you read that book, The Drawdown, it's saying that as to what we are eating, the animal culture and our global imprint, it causes 50% of the global warming. That's an opportunity. I mean, Bill Gates might discover a faster way, but I don't see how it can be a lot faster when we ourselves, if we all did it at once, can change the way we eat tonight when I go to dinner. Okay, so we can do it fast too. So the global energy demand will increase tremendously, but the carbon emissions will increase too. And so let's talk about a little bit more what each of us can do. You don't have to be a politician or a philanthropist. Okay, things you can do: plant a tree. Remember, I plant one, at least one every year. And they're growing up now. I look at a willow tree; it's beautiful. And drive an electric car will make a difference. Don't smoke. Eat a plant-based diet. You've done quite a bit. We can't just depend on the politicians. They go to a conference, all the world come back, and what did they accomplish? Almost nothing. Okay? So you got to do something. But again, if you read this book, it's got 100 things mentioned which affect the environment that you could do. But you need to gather some more information than I'm giving you today. And the bulk of our emissions come from larger systems in which we lead our lives, okay? Our car, our electricity, the house that we live in. Maybe you're eating meat 7 days a week, but maybe you could eat meat like chicken or turkey is still meat, which doesn't have much of a global imprint. You don't have to cut down a forest to grow some chickens or turkey, okay? And so I encourage you also to join a movement. If you know people that are working on this, give you something to do. Join an organization, okay? And so millions in the world already are calling for action, especially young people, and I congratulate them. And remember, money talks. So if you can, if they make money off of increasing global emissions, well, you may point it out to them. You know, you're a billionaire, and there have been people who are billionaires who have promoted unhealthy lifestyles and made their billions from industries that cause a great deal of emissions. The Koch Brothers would be an example, and I'm just quoting this out of a book. And that they fought very hard for any restrictions that a government might put on them. One of those politicians involved with that actually lives in this state. I won't mention his name, but you'll read that name in these books. So get informed. So push local and national politics. Run for an office. You just never know. You may be the guy that can change things. As a consumer also, install a thermostat. And think about how you can decrease emissions. We won't reach zero carbon, no, but maybe we can get closer. And also, you might be willing to pay for some. If you deal with your energy company, they usually have a part of it where you pay $10 more a month, but for that, all the energy is from emission-friendly sources, not coal, oil, or gas, for example. So 13 states require that this option be made available to you, at least that you're aware of it, okay? And there's a center called the Center for Climate Energy Solutions, CES, which you can look online, and they look at pricing programs. I think it's C2ES, and It's about 1 to 2 cents extra per kilowatt hour, maybe $9 to $18 a month, but you'll be doing something. I do that, and I would recommend that we all have to do something. So other things you do, install an LED light in your home that you can get a smart thermostat, insulate your windows, buy efficient appliances, replace your heating and cooling system with a heat pump, build a new house with recycled steel. When you build a house, ask where the steel is from. I'm just trying to see what might ring a bell for you. Buy an electric vehicle. We spoke about that already. Eat a plant-based diet. And as an employee, as an employer, pay some attention to that. At the board meetings, bring it up. Push your company to do it. Some will pay attention, some not. If you work for a company, hey, how about planting some trees around us? And and some employer may just really embrace it. Some do, like Bill Gates. We need to take my hat off to him. And as I already mentioned, we've had 5 mass extensions and four of those were due to changes in the climate. Yeah, and the most lethal one was 250 million years ago. It was a volcanic eruption, released enough CO2 to warm the oceans by 10 degrees Celsius. Yeah. Killed 96% of the marine life, 70% of the plant life. It was called the Great Dying. It's been proven, okay? This is now called the Anthropocene age, the Industrial Revolution. But what these authors are saying, we are probably part of the 6th extinction coming, the Anthropocene extinction, taking into account natural mechanisms and human activity is responsible for 100% of it. We're doing it ourselves. We're on a suicide mission. And current climate change caused not by natural events, they're caused largely by what we're eating, what we're doing, what we're manufacturing, electricity that we're using. The 6th extinction is in the climate crisis. And humans represent the life on Earth, if you count plants and animals, less than 1% of the things what we're thinking up to do. Since the advent of 80% of wild animals, okay, since the advent of agriculture, 12,000, 10,000 years ago, okay, 83% of the wild animals and half of the plants have been destroyed. We did that. We're doing it. If you really read what we're doing to the animals now to put them on your plate, you may not continue to eat them like I did. Some of the factory farming, read about that. Although I spoke about eating some chicken and turkey, but I read about chicken too. And what they're doing with them today. They cut off their beaks of all the males. So because the chicks would peck each other because of the bad environment, what they see. They tried putting patches over their eyes, but that didn't work, so now they cut their beaks off. If you read about that, you may not be eating that either. So our planet is an animal farm. And 59% of the land globally is capable of growing crops and food for livestock. 1/3 of all that water that's around goes to livestock. Okay, 70% of the antibiotics that are made today go to livestock. 60% of all animals are raised for food, so we eat them. Can you imagine the global impact? And so 30 farmed animals for every human in the lifetime on the planet, our lifetime. That's how much we eat. Our population growth is increasing all the time, and we used to live 30 years. Now we're living close to 80 years, and we're going to have probably 10 billion people living on this planet end of the century if we're still around. Okay, so our eating is radical. We're eating meat and dairy, and if you read a book by Joe Keon called Whitewash, read that book. I've read it 5 times probably. I've not had a drink of cow's milk since that time. It's not healthy. Industry has pushed it at us, and the government has been bribed by a lot of people. They even give it away for free at different places and make kids drink milk when indeed it causes increased rates of cancer and diabetes. Milk does that. We don't have the enzyme to digest it. Evolution, nature has designed us that usually at age 4, we don't have the enzyme to digest cow's milk. Asians don't have it at all. Blacks have maybe 50%, and whites maybe 40% have that enzyme, and at age 4 usually cuts out. I have a glass of milk, and I don't drink anymore, but if I had it, I'd have stomach upset because I can't digest the lactose, the sugar in milk. And the casein in milk, the protein, has cancer associated with it and causes a lot of the children's cancer that we're seeing. Most people don't know that. Whitewash, Joe Keon, it will tell you that. And according to models of cyclical climate change, the Earth should be experiencing a period of slight cooling. It occurs periodically. It heats up, it cycles. That's part, and that's normal. And but 9 of the 10 warmest years have been since 2005. It's difficult to predict for certain what's going to happen 10 years from now, but we have to pay attention to what's close to us. During the Great Dying, 240 million years ago, a series of Siberian volcanoes covered the country with lava the size of 3 Eiffel Towers, covered the whole world. I just mentioned that out of interest. And let's talk a little bit more science here. Sunlight passes through the atmosphere, okay, and heats the Earth. A portion bounces back into space. Okay, remember they have the ozone layer there. It hits the ozone layer and bounces back again. But we catch enough warmth to keep us warm. So greenhouse gases in the atmosphere trap some of the outgoing heat. It comes down and goes back, and the greenhouse gases trap some of that to help keep us warm, but it can make us too warm. Okay, and so life on Earth depends on the greenhouse effect. Without it, the Earth temperature would be near 0 Fahrenheit instead of average of 59. Okay, so we do need some greenhouses, but we need a certain amount, not the amount that we have. CO2 accounts for 82% of the greenhouse gas. The majority is emitted by industry. Transport, industry, 33%. Transportation, trucks, cars, railroads, about 19%. Electrical, about 17%. Less than 800,000 years before the Industrial Revolution, greenhouse gases were stabilized. They were stable. It could be dealt with, and it wasn't excessive. Since the Industrial Revolution, gases have increased. CO2 in the atmosphere has increased about 40%. Mm-hmm. And methane, nitrous oxide, about 18%. And food has increased it higher than that, about 50%. Mm-hmm. About 50%. And why deforestation matters, cutting down the forest. Trees are carbon sponges. They absorb CO2 that's being emitted. Vegetation stores about 25% of the emissions. And if you go over a century, they absorbed about 50% of the emissions that occurred. And the more forests we destroy, the less storage of facilities used have. So CO2 can't be stored, methane, nitrous oxides, and it goes to the atmosphere instead, leading to global warming. Allowing tropical land to go back to forests would reduce global greenhouse effect about 50%. Mm-hmm. If we could now, they're talking about the Amazon in Brazil. The president of Brazil wants to cut down more forests and make animal farms out of it because his people are desperate for work and ability to make a living, but they're killing the planet in the process. So trees are 50% carbon. They release their stores of CO2 when they are burned or when they're cut down. And cutting and burning of trees accounts for a good 15% of global warming. Deforestation in tropical fields releases carbon into the atmosphere. We mentioned that already. And then the sum total of cars and trucks on the world roads have a tremendous effect. 80% of deforestation, cutting the forest down, occurs clearing land for crops for livestock. And of course, the livestock put out also toxic gases. So cutting the forest down can collect the CO2, putting animals there, and then we eat the animals. You can see all that as a tremendous amount of global warming gases we're putting together. Burning the forest is like opening the tap and closing the drain. Okay, you get a bathtub, and you get water running in. You just open that up and you close the drain, and you can just see the water overflowing, and your whole house will be underwater. So not all deforestation is equally. Okay, in 2018, Brazil, a deforestation plan would have increased, because they cut the forest down, 13.2 gigatons, okay? And a tremendous amount of, and then they put in agriculture, which I already mentioned, increased tremendously. So animal agriculture causes climate change. As the cattle digest food, goats, sheep, they produce methane, even the strongest and the worst of the gases. They belch, they exhale it, it's in this stool. So livestock is the leading cause of methane emissions. The strongest one is stronger than CO2. and nitrous oxide, also produced by livestock in the manure and the urine, fertilizers, and they're used for growing crops. We fertilize crops that we eat, and leads to global warming. You may call it organic, but you're adding to the footprint here. And animal agriculture is a leading cause of deforestation. Mm-hmm. If cows were a country, they'd be the third leading cause of greenhouse emissions. Wow. And animal agriculture, when you add it up, 51% of animal cause 51% of the global emissions. So if you use what we eat and the animals, you can see if we ate less meat and we ourselves ate a more friendlier diet and ate, and you say, what do I teach people to prevent diabetes? To eat good fats, guacamole, olives, and fats from plants, 20% protein, 15% fruits and berries, and you'd be rid of your diabetes probably in a month. And so that'd be consistent with the climate and with you. So I save the climate and I'm saving you. And so it's impossible to defend the ticking time bomb without reducing our consumption of animal products. I said it. I didn't say be a vegan or be a vegetarian. Okay. Cut back, eat good fats from plants, and you're not eating animals. You eat one occasionally. I mean, that's up to you. And so we're going to try to keep global warming at or below 2 degrees Celsius. The goal of the Paris Accord, and we have a CO2 emission budget to work with, 565 gigatons by 2050. We have to reverse that. But you can see with the population growing, with industry not changing, this will be difficult to do. We need to change. We need to change what we eat, and we need to expand our global imprint. And if you were to read this drawdown book, I'll hold it up again, book, 100 different ways that we can affect the global imprint and the imprint of your body and the globe, and you will live to be 100. I encourage you to read more. The 2 books are held up. Another one I like is We Are the Weather. We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer is also an excellent book. So gather information, be open-minded, and participate in the politics, and do it yourself in your family, and teach the children, and you'll all live to be 100, and the earth will still be here, and you can come up to me and give me a hug and say, "Doctor, I want to play you in pickleball or tap dance." And thanks for listening. We'll bring this subject up again. This will be on YouTube. Yeah, you can watch it. But I just want you to gather information, and then you may participate in what I'm speaking about. I doubt the government will solve the problem. It will take a movement. It will take us joining hands and saving the planet and ourselves and our families in the process. Thank you for listening. I love you. Bye-bye.